He's just 16. His violent behavior has landed him in a cell at the Okeechobee State School for boys. He's been in trouble since he was 10. 17 years old, his sixth stay at the state school, a chronic burglar. 14 years old, arrested 40 times for breaking and entering, strong-arm robbery, assault, and other offenses. In the juvenile justice system since he was 9 years old. These boys are typical of many adolescents who are in trouble with the law today, and all the millions of dollars spent on rehabilitation programs for them can't seem to stop the rising rate of juvenile crime or the repeat offenders. In 1976, 26% of all arrests in Broward County and 23% in Dade were juveniles under 18. More than 10,000 youngsters were arrested in Broward last year, more than 17,000 in Dade County. In the city of Plantation in Broward County in 1976, 463 adults were taken into custody, 1,000 juveniles. In the city of Miami between 1975 and 1976, burglaries committed by youngsters jumped 130%. Larcenies were up 114%. For Florida in general last year, 41% of all serious crimes were committed by youths under 18, and that's rising. The average age for these offenses is just 15 years old.
The juveniles probably commit the more serious crimes, and juveniles don't have the same kind of understanding and responsibility or even fear that adults have. And so if you get a 14-year-old kid involved in a burglary, your life is really threatened by that child much more than it would be if it was an adult who was proficient in burglary and understood the risks a lot better.
Max Rothman administers the state's $4 million system here to deal with delinquents. He asked a group of foster parents why these kids get involved with crime.
I expected to hear that such things as, well, the kids didn't have jobs, or that they were racially discriminated against, or that their housing was very poor. And the one thing they came back to me with was their families. Their families had given up on them. They were getting a hold of these kids after 15 years of neglect. No discipline, no incentive, no stimulation, tremendous boredom. They couldn't even get the real families to come over and participate in family-oriented activities with these children.
So, state and local governments have, in effect, created pretend families in their numerous rehabilitation programs. Too many times, however, the impossible task is like using a Band-Aid to help a terminal victim, and the really hardcore juvenile delinquent gets almost no help at all. Next, a look at the programs. Ike SEAMAN'S Channel 4 News.
I feel that Terry needs to change his attitude towards people when they come off wrong to him, do something that he don't like.
This is a group therapy session at the new state-run halfway house for boys in the southwest section of Miami. And this is a group session at Pentland Hall, which is for girls. The average age for both boys and girls is 15 and a half. The average stay in the halfway houses is 4.5 months. These streetwise children have been in trouble for years. They have just one thing in common: irresponsible behavior brought on by a variety of problems. 9 out of 10 kids have trouble at home. 2/3 come from broken families. All have been in trouble with the law for years. While living at the disciplined and highly structured halfway houses, they take academic and vocational courses. But it's the group that the system relies on to instill in them maturity and confidence.
In a group, if you're discussing things and you've got a lot of people sitting there listening to you, it's a lot harder to con somebody else, because you're working with a lot of people that have been in the same situation, and you're not going to be able to make a lot of excuses because you'll get caught in them. You have the other option of getting a lot of input from people who've had similar problems and have worked them out.
The halfway houses claim a high rate of success, which is needed as proof for future funding. And well, they should. All of them only accept intelligent youngsters who meet rigid acceptance standards and who agree to enter the program. The really hard challenges, the hardcore delinquent who keeps returning to the juvenile justice system, is avoided.
Counselors figure, well, they're going to send a kid to a halfway house if they really think that she's got a chance to work it out and make it. And I think the boys, they do the same thing. They've got more programs for boys than they do for girls. The physically aggressive child does present a threat to the other girls and would kind of stifle what the girls would things that the girls would have to say and do to work out some of the things that they're working on, and they wouldn't be able to do it as well because they would be afraid that they were going to get harmed.
Administrators readily accept criticisms directed at their programs, but they have a very logical defense.
We get them too late. A lot of kids start developing a behavior pattern of acting out when they're 9 and 10 years old, and their parents don't deal with it, or they don't know how to deal with it, and they don't know what to do about it, so they just throw their hands up and say, I can't do anything with this kid, son, you know, you take care of her, you try her. Whereas I think that they could. My dollars would be going into establishing better or more, actually more, preventive type programs when a kid's first starting to have some problems.
That's another well-recognized fact that few administrators or lawmakers seem willing to do much about. Next, a look at another rehabilitation program, the Tri-Center. Ike Seaman's Channel 4 News. Streetwise kids, hardened by repeated encounters with the law and the juvenile justice system, really can't con 31-year-old Lenny Perlman. That's because he was a con man himself. By his mid-teens on New York's Lower East Side, he was a welfare case, a criminal, and by his own admission, nuts. Only 6 years of intense therapy, something not available for similar youngsters in Florida, saved him. Today, he runs the Tri-Center, a non-residential state rehabilitation program for teenagers, most of whom could not qualify for other public or private treatment centers due to rigid and restrictive acceptance standards. But the approach here is the same. Try to show them a better way. Statistically, Perlman's disciplined operation is one of the most successful.
Kids don't need punishment. You see, they get punished when they're locked up. He needs to be able to recognize his own responsibility in terms of the crime he committed. He might come from atrocious conditions. He might have no father or an alcoholic father or a prostitute for a mother, which justifies, in many cases, his criminality in terms of his own mind. But he needs to be taught that that is not an excuse, that he can change, that some people love him. Most of our kids cannot distinguish between discipline and love. In other words, their parents usually discipline them, but they don't love them. They don't show them affection or love. And that's what they need. They need a combination of both. A lot of these kids come from families whose parents are very poor. The kids aren't working. I don't see why on God's earth these kids aren't allowed to work at 14 and 15 and 16. It's almost impossible to get a 14-year-old kid a job today. And so if you can get $50 stealing, then why not? That's their attitude.
As a child, Perlman ran with black street gangs, and he has a bachelor's degree in Afro-American Studies. His rehabilitation center is one of just 3 in Florida, which has more blacks than whites. He feels young blacks are shortchanged by the system, but few people care.
I think that when the discussion is brought up about blacks in the juvenile justice system, it's taboo. Blacks don't like to discuss it, and whites don't like to discuss it. And I'm not saying that blacks are more criminal than whites. I'm just saying that given the numbers that I've come across, the statistics, blacks seem to be proportionately much more into the system than whites are, into the more restrictive system, in other words, state school.
That's correct. In the state's 35 community-based programs, 68% of the children are white, only 31% are black. But at the state school at Okeechobee, 54% are black, while blacks overall make up just 17% of Florida's population. More on this later. Next, a young black who was lucky. Ike Seaman's Channel 4 News. 15-year-old David first exhibited violent behavior in the 4th grade when he stabbed a teacher. He was 10. That was the start of a series of criminal activities: breaking and entering, petty larceny, grand larceny, aggravated battery, assault. And those are just the offenses he was caught for. David did most of these things after his concerned mother moved the family from the tough Overtown section to a northwest residential area. The reason he got in trouble is not surprising. You can find the explanation in any textbook on juvenile crime. Why did you steal?
Why did I steal? For the fun, man. Just to be with, just to be with the big boys, that's all.
In other words, peer pressure and the longing for acceptance. Then came the drugs.
Well, put it like this: we get high, we want to make some money, so we go make some. That's the way we know.
Get high and go make some money?
Yep, that's that's the way it was. That's the way it was, like they call it street road. Get high and go make some money.
Does that go on the street a lot?
Every day.
Are a lot of kids into stealing and getting high and taking cars, stuff like that?
A lot of them. Yeah.
Why do you really want to do that? I mean, do you need the money? Tell me about that.
Nah, it ain't no need. It's just, something that you do when you go along with your friends. You be a group of people, and you want to do something to just sit around, and you can't find nothing good to do, so you go do something bad.
David was lucky. He was placed in the Tri-Center, a state rehabilitation program, which is one of the few in the system that's willing to deal with the tough cases. He's now back in high school and seems to understand why he must stay out of trouble. If he does not, the Okeechobee State School awaits, the only place that accepts hardcore juvenile troublemakers. A look at that next. Ike Seaman's Channel 4 News. Inside the Okeechobee State School, one of 4 in Florida, are 450 of the hardest core delinquents, both boys and girls. They are dumped here because no other state or privately run program will take them. They're considered a threat to facilities which frankly admit they want to work with youngsters that are easier to rehabilitate, a prime consideration to assure the program's existence. Even federal agencies like the Job Corps won't accept those with a history of chronic delinquency. Most youngsters stay here at the school for 6 months. Not long enough by anyone's standards. The average age is 15 and a half, but some are as young as 12. 30% have been here before. Administrators say they are not equipped to provide treatment. They can only try to plant a seed of hope. For some it may work, but others learn new lessons here.
Like I might sit down and talk with Ron here. We might discuss, like, I broken this bank, Like, he might think he could go out and do it. Since I got away with it, he can think he can go out there and get away with it.
Listening to these macho men children who look years older than their teens makes it clear that they are strongly influenced by their environments.
I ain't need the money nothing like that, but the people I hang with every day and all, we just had a little game. We just go and break in houses or either drive around and do some foolish stuff on the streets and all.
I'm easily misled, and I do things on the street with other fellas, and then when it comes time for somebody to get caught, I'll take the blame for it, and then I'll come up here, and I've been here 6 times.
I just need the money. I was a little too young to get a job, you see, man.
17-year-old Andre is from Carroll City and has been sent to Okeechobee 4 times. His violent behavior has landed him in isolation on 16 occasions. On the streets full-time as a thief since he was 13, he says he received no guidance at home or from the system.
It's hurting me now, but it's damaging me, and I say that because if I somehow wouldn't come back, probably would have, did a little better, because it's dudes in here wants to do their time and go back out on the streets and finish picking up what they left off, you see.
if I can find something to rehabilitate me on the outside, get a job or something like that, just yeah.
Suppose a 12-year-old kid that you knew was getting into crime for the first time. You saw him doing it. What would you tell him?
I hate to see you go the same thing I have been through.
You wouldn't want him to go through what you've been through?
No, I'm telling you, I would. Really would.
Bad.
Tell him. Good.
I would tell him about this place, and I'd let him know that if he kept on, what he'd be looking forward to. He would be looking forward to coming here.
Tomorrow, a further look at the Okeechobee State School. Ike SEAMAN'S, Channel 4 News.
I tell him how it is here and what he's doing.
At the Okeechobee State School, the official mission is the creation of an environment to help the committed juvenile criminal mature and to act responsible. That can only occur if they accept the program, but many don't. A lot of these streetwise kids who are 15 and a half going on 30 simply play the con game as they yes sir and no sir and I'm going to go straight sir through the school. Some even talk of doing their time on good behavior in order to get out quickly. And some learn how to become more proficient criminals from their buddies. But for those who want to learn, they can. The average academic achievement level is the 5th grade, and some are learning to read and write for the first time. Because their criminal fate will be sealed unless they can learn a trade, vocational courses are offered here. The well-meaning counseling staff, most of whom have learned their jobs at Okeechobee, face an impossible task due to overcrowded conditions and short commitment.
We have such short exposure in terms of time, the kids, generally less than 3 months. That includes the more seriously in need emotionally. So there's very little we can accomplish with 3 months' time, within 3 months' time, when actually a treatment format would be limited to once, maybe twice a week because of the population.
Howard Guilford, Okeechobee's superintendent for 19 years, says 25 to 30% of the children actually succeed in the program. That's about the national average for similar institutions. But the school does not pretend to make available the intense therapy or treatment these delinquents are subconsciously crying out for. In fact, it's not available anywhere in the public or private facilities in Florida. Without saying it, the system is saying to these youngsters, some are destined for a loser's life, and you are among them.
We deal with the social actor-outer, the kid that people have given up on in terms of changing his behavior. They haven't given up on him completely as a human being yet. Some have reached that stage, but I think the kids get here out of frustration, not their own, but frustration of those people who have been dealing with them, trying to change unsuccessfully their behavior. I think we help a great deal. I think, again, a lot of the expectations of the training schools in general by the lay public are unrealistic. They have expectations of us taking a kid and completely rebuilding his personality and turning his social behavior around. We don't do that. We're not equipped to do it. I think one of the best descriptions of what we do is provide an introductory exposure to alternative lifestyles to these kids who have developed a lifestyle that just isn't acceptable.
Plant a seed.
More or less, and hope that it germinates once they leave here.
But more than 30% return to the state school, and more re-enter the juvenile courts. A look at them starting tomorrow. Ike SEAMAN'S, Channel 4 News. Detention facilities and the juvenile courts in South Florida are jammed daily with youngsters in trouble with the law. But of the 27,000 adolescents arrested in Dade and Broward last year, just 20 to 25% actually went to court. Those who did not were put on probation. Others, provided they are not chronic troublemakers, were placed in treatment programs. But according to juvenile court judges, the majority were just sent home and were back on the streets quickly. Even for those sent to court, it's questionable how much good it does them. Under the Florida system, a juvenile judge has no sentencing power. He can only recommend to the Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services what should be done with a child, even if they are locked up at the state school or placed in a community-based program. They'll probably only stay 3 to 6 months. As a result, most streetwise kids know it's no big deal to be caught, and they return again and again.
There are some 16-year-olds, I've seen them here, that have as many as 40 and 50 burglaries, times that they are caught for burglary. Now, you can imagine how many times they were not caught. These people are in the game for profit, and once they're in the game for profit, they need to be treated accordingly.
They're not impressed with the juvenile system. They know the system hasn't done anything either for them, hasn't done anything to them. So they just go through the motions and play the game.
22-year-old Julio Machoso is a youth counselor who once was a tough delinquent. He confirms the sometimes easy treatment based on his experience.
It was a very easy system to beat, okay? Very easy, very easy. I went to a hearing, okay? And it was an assault and battery case. And they just asked me a couple of questions. I lied, and the witnesses didn't show up, so they dismissed the whole case. I had friends that were arrested 5, 6 times, and they were out in the street, you know, 2 days later.
Jose Fernandez, another youth counselor who works for a private rehabilitation agency, says the system is also erratic when handing out punishment.
Less than a year ago, I had a kid who stole 2 jars of peanut butter. And from there, he was placed in my program. He didn't work out there. And his probation officer transferred him to another stricter program. He didn't work out there because it was just stricter to meet the requirements. He ended up in state school.
The state school? For
right.
2 jars of peanut butter?
For 2 jars of peanut butter.
An isolated case? Maybe. But the boy in question could also be the victim of a system in which overworked caseworkers and probation officers can spend little time with individuals to determine what kind of punishment or treatment really is needed. Next, the story of a juvenile delinquent who fell through the cracks of the system. Ike SEAMAN'S, Channel 4 News.
Would it be your testimony that Lester is an individual who seems to fall within the cracks of the juvenile justice rehabilitative system?
Yes.
15-year-old Lester, 4 feet 4 inches tall, 65 pounds. He's been arrested 40 times, and he's been in the juvenile justice system for 6 years. Indeed, he has fallen through the bureaucratic cracks.
This young man has been here before and before and before. I've seen him innumerable times here. I've never yet come in contact with any program that's been in any way successful with him.
Actually, during his 2 stays at the Okeechobee State School for the hardest core delinquents, Lester was successful, in a way. He got out in 5 months each time by staying on good behavior.
But you've heard Mr. Perry's testimony that when he was returned to the community, almost immediately, he became involved with alleged delinquent behavior. What does that indicate to you as far as whether or not he had actually successfully completed your program?
Regretfully, he has successfully completed the program, but regretfully, we can offer no warranty or guarantee.
Now Lester's fate is down to this. For his latest crimes, should he be tried in adult court as the state wants, or should this mentally and physically underdeveloped boy be kept by the Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services, which has not helped change his antisocial behavior?
I'm going to keep him here and make sure that you all do what you're supposed to do with him, what hasn't been done in the last 6 years. I'm not accusing you and your department, but I think that every one of us who are in this room, who have some role here, have failed terribly in not being able to do something for this young man who has amassed this kind of a record and sits here and goes through our system almost untouched by it. It's almost pathetic.
Lester will go back to Okeechobee, where the state frankly admits there is little of the kind of treatment he needs. The court will closely supervise his progress. But it's not easy trying to help a mildly retarded boy who's had little parental guidance and who resorted to crime in the first place to compensate for his small size and to impress his friends. His case is certainly unusual, but it points up a real problem in an overloaded system that seems to have problems individualizing treatment.
It's the failures that destroy the community. And that's what we have here, a failure.
Next, a close look at young blacks in the juvenile justice system. Ike Seaman's, Channel 4 News. Today in South Florida, more young blacks are involved proportionately in crime than other ethnic groups. According to a study by juvenile court judge Seymour Gelber, blacks make up 15% of Dade County's total population. But young blacks commit 55% of all offenses here. However, it is well documented that the vast majority of criminal activity results from economic conditions and environment, not because of race. And a lot of poor white youngsters are seen in all segments of the juvenile justice system. It is a fact that many blacks still find themselves relegated to poorer sections of the community and to less than satisfactory jobs or no jobs at all. It's also no secret that trying to avoid crime in such circumstances is difficult.
So yes, there is this awareness, but how do you stop someone who doesn't have anything from stealing? How do you really do that? How does a mama who has to work, that has 6 children, really keep a handle on those 6 children? It gets to be an enormously consequential problem.
I don't think that society has to be apologetic about punishing someone who breaks the law. I think that that is a requirement. But in our system, the people who end up most often in jail, particularly the younger down you go in the ladder, are going to be black.
Statistics bear that out even in the juvenile justice system and in programs geared to help delinquents. But it's easy to criticize a system that is perhaps asked to do the impossible, change patterns of behavior years in the making. Some black leaders say it's time for the black community to take action.
I think the black community is a victim of its own problem. When I lived in the ghetto in Fort Lauderdale, so to speak, on Northwest 15th Way, my home was burglarized 7 times. I had 3 cars stolen. I was robbed personally, face-to-face, gun-wise, with a pistol.
A lot of people in the black community are very angry at these kids, are very hostile themselves. A lot of kids who could make it if we gave them enough help. And I'm getting less and less comfortable with attempts to shift the burden of responsibility for saving black youths on white people in our society. I think we in the black community have to recognize the crisis and address it first.
Are black youth getting a fair shake in the juvenile justice system now?
Absolutely, as fair as Chapter 39 permits. They too are being slapped on the wrist and sent home.
Next, a look at the state's youth services, which runs many of the rehabilitation programs for delinquents. Ike Seaman's, Channel 4 News. To handle the 18,000 delinquents who enter the juvenile justice system each year are just 36 probation and parole counselors of the Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services in Dade County. Every treatment program is jammed to capacity, so the vast majority of kids in trouble with the law are just sent home, and the counselors are supposed to deal with them. At any given time, a counselor may have to handle as many as 90 kids, And an independent study made in Broward County claims the typical caseworker spends only 5 to 7 minutes a month face-to-face with his client. Most in the system complain that they also have to fight a mountainous paperwork war to justify their existence to Tallahassee bureaucrats and to legislators who control the purse strings. Yet, for all youth programs, Florida spends less than at least 40 other states. And as juvenile crime mounts, so does the criticism of the state's efforts to deal with it.
Local programs do not work with the hardcore child in trouble.
Why?
Because they're harder to work with.
And I think that we've got a lot of programs that are mostly fads. We think that placing a child in a 3 months or 6 months group therapy program is going to alter that child. We're kidding ourselves about the juvenile system.
Obviously, the system is not doing the job. There needs to be a different kind of relationship between the people the administrative people that run the system and the people who are on the first line actually carrying out the programs and policies.
But in an agency of this size, over 3,300 employees, it doesn't surprise me that you would find complaints of that nature.
Max Rothman runs the HRS in Dade County. He says he's trying to improve both the morale and the programs for delinquents here.
We need to get additional counselor strength in the area where we're first coming into contact with these youngsters. We need to do a better job in diversion. We need to do a better job in follow-up. We need to do a better job in the quality of the cases that we're presenting to the courts. And the only way we can do that is with increased resources. There's no other answer.
Everybody needs money, but it's hardly the answer. If we were making some progress that was of substantial nature, I would say yes, if we added 10% more, we'd improve 10%, but it just doesn't work that way. We didn't have money here 15 years ago. We have probably 100 times more money being spent now, but the improvement is minuscule if it exists at all. But the problem still hasn't changed. We're still almost standing still, if not going backwards.
Next, a look at some new ways to deal with juvenile crime. Ike Seaman's Channel 4 News. In every Dade County secondary school, there are special group sessions available to youngsters who are either assigned there because of antisocial behavior or they want to be there to work out problems. Some elementary schools also have similar sessions, but there's a shortage of counselors and there has been no assessment to determine how effective such group therapy has been. Further, it is clear that the school system either is not equipped or will not deal with the really hardcore delinquent. Proof of this is that 1/4 of the juvenile court caseload involves incidents in schools. And a profile of over 600 teenage offenders reveals that 21% were recent school dropouts. 87% were truant on the day they committed their crime, typically burglary, usually during the middle of the week. 50% had a long history of truancy. Broward County schools are acting on such information to identify the potential teenage criminal. 2 years ago, Boyd Anderson High School set up a truancy center to handle kids brought in by police. All students must carry an identification card indicating their class hours. A truant is taken immediately back to school. Other schools have adopted the idea, and officials say attendance is up and crime is down significantly around the schools. There is nothing like this being done in Dade County. But in Miami, the police department now has an innovative project aimed at stopping the first offender from pursuing criminal activity. Lieutenant Richard Whitt conceived the federally funded project.
Well, I think early intervention is the answer. When a child has progressed to the degree where they've been in and out of institutions and in and out of programs, and they are 16 to 17 years old, your success rate is extremely low, and it's much, much too late. When a child first manifests any type of behavior that would indicate that this child is about to enter a pattern of delinquency and crime, that's when the intervention should begin.
Once a youngster is accepted into the diversionary project, one of 8 professional caseworkers visits the family, who must voluntarily agree to seek assistance. Then a complete history is taken, school records are checked, and medical and psychological tests are conducted. Then a suitable rehabilitation program is found for the child. The caseworker follows through to assure he's being helped. Since the project began 8 months ago, about 900 first offender teenagers have been diverted from the juvenile justice system, and the police claim that 85% of them have had no further negative contact with the law. Tomorrow, a final look at the juvenile justice system. Ike Seaman's Channel 4 News. At the outset, it must be said that one of the easiest tasks is to criticize the juvenile justice system, which most of the time seems to be charged with an impossible job, trying to pick up the pieces of an increasing number of juvenile delinquents after others, including many times the family, have given up. But there are shortcomings that stand out. First, there is almost a total lack of prevention programs which would help young children when they first exhibit the signs of delinquent behavior. Public agencies in Florida are not even authorized by law to set up such programs. Instead, almost everything has been directed at the child who has been in trouble for years. The hardcore delinquent is almost totally ignored as he winds his way through the system until the adult agencies take him. Only the state school will take this individual now since it is required to, and there is no treatment available there to help his deeply rooted problems. Counselors in public agencies are overworked, and they spend just minutes each month working face-to-face with huge caseloads, and they're required to fight a paperwork war to satisfy their superiors. Child Advocacy Incorporated is a Broward County organization that is trying to get more cooperation with all the elements of the juvenile justice system. It also has developed a list of shortcomings it has noticed. One charge is that administrators don't really know which programs are worthwhile and which are worthless. Plus, they have not accurately measured the results for longer than a year at best. There has also been a lack of innovations and an unwillingness to change according to the child advocacy group. And juvenile judges criticize the short treatment programs. They call them too permissive and fads. Personnel in some cases are poorly trained and poorly paid in many of the programs. Another charge is that the system waits too long to jerk the reins on kids. The system is filled with repeat offenders who have been caught dozens of times, and they move through the system almost untouched by it. Finally, there's a total lack of family treatment in the juvenile justice system, and that is important because so much delinquency starts at home when the family neglects the child. Some even want family courts to hold parents accountable for their child's criminal actions. The criticisms go on and on. Perhaps the most discouraging thing is that almost none of what we have listed is news to anyone involved with delinquent kids. The ideas have been written and talked about for years. Ike Seaman's Channel 4 News.